The Tom Woods Show, episode 2240.
Prepare to set fire to the index card of allowable opinion. Your daily dose of liberty education starts here. The Tom Woods Show.
Hey, all you old-timers out there from the Ron Paul 2008 campaign, you may remember my friend Larry Lepard, who spent $200,000 of his own money on full-page newspaper ads in support of Dr. Paul. Well, Larry has had an uncanny way with money over the years, and he made a presentation to my paid membership on how to insure yourself against currency debasement. That is to say, how to survive inflation. Well, I took that presentation out from behind the paywall, and I'm making it available to the general public for free. Check it out at tomwoods.com/Larry. Hi, everybody. Tom Woods here. Very glad to be joined by Peter Zaborsky, a tech entrepreneur whose project, retalk.com, is designed for people who are tired of Silicon Valley and where all voices can be heard. He launched it 2 years ago, and born in communist Hungary, he has quite a bit to say about the suppression of dissident voices. So, Peter, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Do you mind actually if we start there? First of all, I'm going to ask you just right here on the air. Do you mind if I ask how old you are?
I'm 37 years old. Yeah, no, I don't mind at all.
Okay. So 37. Okay, I mean, that would have been, so you were born in 1985-ish?
Yeah. I mean, I wasn't really very aware of my communist backgrounds, like personally. The change of regime happened in 89. But, I've heard all the stories from my parents and my grandparents of what it's like to live in a communist country. My family is very, very aware of what it's like to live in a system like that.
Right. So that was kind of what I was driving at. I mean, as you say, you didn't become politically aware, of course, when you were 4 years old. But as you did become older, you must have realized that before you were born, something quite terrible had happened. What were the sorts of things they told you about?
I think for me, it's been a very good contrast that I actually moved to the UK when I was 10 years old. So I sort of lived in the English-speaking world for quite a while. And to contrast that with all the stories that I've heard, especially from my grandparents, I think they lived in the most extreme circumstances. And to compare that with even what's going on today with all the sort of suppression and all the woke culture in the English-speaking world is quite scary. I think a really good example is my grandmother. When she was a child, she was sort of a really, really good student. She did really well in school. She was very, very hardworking, and she really wanted to become a doctor. And when she applied to university, they basically said, nope, your father was a dissident. Your father is against the communists, so you can't go to university. So she was sort of rejected. All her hard work was completely pointless, and she worked as a secretary for most of her life. And I think you can probably draw some parallels there of what's going on in sort of the higher education system in the world right now, and how you can pretty much be rejected for your political views probably today now as well. And I think for me, just that to me was like this dystopian nightmare, and that seems to be becoming a reality now in the world as well. And that's sort of partly why I started working on this social network, because I really feel like I need to do something about this. And I really love the UK. I love the US. I love the sort of culture of freedom. And it seems to be very much under attack right now.
Of course, what goes on in Western countries is more subtle, softer than the open and obvious communist regime. So, for instance, there are certain civil rights laws that they don't generally protect, let's say, people who aren't considered to be members of quote unquote marginalized groups, but still companies don't want to run afoul of them if they can avoid it. And so they wouldn't openly say to you, we're not hiring you because of your creed. They wouldn't openly say that. They just wouldn't hire you.
Yeah, I mean, then you'd be sued.
So yeah, right. And then I remember when I was a professor years and years ago, I was on a search committee. We were trying to hire maybe it was a dean of students, something like that. And we got an applicant from Texas. Now, this college was in New York. We got an applicant from Texas. And pretty much everybody in the room said, oh, we can just reject that one. And they rejected it. And it was obvious they rejected it because they took the word Texas as a proxy for potentially conservative. And they did not want to run that risk. So Texas was all the indication they needed. And so it was just thrown out. And I thought, this is how it happens. This is how it happens. So I observed that myself. Now, here's the thing. When I first found out about you, it was in a press release relating to what we've been discovering here in the US, discovering really what we already knew, but getting it confirmed with documentation about campaigns to influence big tech by the government to get them to police quote unquote misinformation in the way the government wants and targeting specific individuals in the way the government wants. I think when The Intercept published that story, I don't think there was that much outrage, not because people are happy with it, but because it's drearily predictable at this point. I don't think it even came as a surprise.
Well, I think to me, the actual facts didn't come as a surprise. What came as a surprise is that the first time I heard really about it was when Zuckerberg was on the Joe Rogan podcast. And I couldn't believe that Zuckerberg could actually speak so openly about it and that he just admitted it like that.
Yeah.
That was quite amazing. But again, the actual fact that it was happening isn't really shocking. I think everyone knew deep down that there's something like that is going on. But it's just, to me, it's amazing. And one of the reasons I started Retalk is that back, 10, 20 years ago, Silicon Valley had this dream, I think everyone was sort of quite libertarian. They believed in freedom. They believed in openness. And then somehow, I think probably 6 or 7 years ago, when Trump got elected, that just all went out the window. Everyone became completely authoritarian. Everyone realized, we've got to control information. We've got to control people because they're dangerous and democracy is under threat and all that. And somehow Silicon Valley turned into this authoritarian nightmare. And yes, and now we even have proof of that, as you said in that article, that it's been happening. I can only hope that maybe put some pressure on these companies to stop doing that. And maybe Twitter will change as well. There's a bit of hope there around the whole Elon Musk acquisition. But it's quite amazing what's been happening over the last 6 years, I'd say.
It does look like Musk is pushing it in the right direction, but it still seems to me it'll never be exactly what it ought to be, and it'll still be 25% worse than it should be. It seems like there will still be more, quote, content moderation than, in my opinion, there should be. And everybody, by the way, everybody thinks, or everybody is pretending to think, that the issue is Elon just wants everybody to be able to scream ethnic slurs at the top of their lungs. That has nothing to do with this at all. It has to do with people who post very often quite true statements and then disappear without any notice, just like that, in which the appeal process is a joke. And so even something as obviously debatable as whether we should have had lockdowns or not, that's obviously debatable. But you have to look over your shoulder half the time because we know Facebook doesn't think it's debatable. YouTube doesn't think it's debatable. They're not going to take down every single possible post that talks about it because how could they? But it just means you have to be looking over your shoulder constantly. And so even the new and improved Twitter looks like, to me, it's still going to have some of that, which is very unfortunate.
Yeah, I think there's a bit of an issue here with the difference between moderation and censorship. And as you said, I don't think there's ever going to be a perfect platform because there are a lot of reasons why you do need to do moderation. There's a very clear difference between moderation, which is more about how the community wants to communicate and what sort of platform the community wants to create. And moderation is about slightly controlling one-to-one communication and how that one-to-one communication happens. Whereas with censorship, you always have an authority coming in and saying, this is what should happen from the top. And I think if a platform is tending towards just moderation and it's more that the users are actually controlling what they see rather than censorship, where there's an authority coming in from the top who's saying, look, yes, lockdowns are good. That's what we want. And that's what we want to see on the platform. That's completely different because then it's not about the users actually deciding between themselves what they want to see, but it's about an authority, and that authority can always use that power and exploit it. And we've seen that get worse and worse. And exactly what all the free speech advocates have been warning about is that once you create these powers, they're just going to be abused more and more. That's exactly what's happening. So I think where I see a really big problem is when you have so-called authorities coming in and telling you what is truth, what is right, what should be discussed, what shouldn't be discussed. That's where there's a big problem. And my hope is that gets better. But I do agree with you. There's always going to be a bit of an issue with every single platform, I think, because you can't have a perfect system where the free speech issue works perfectly. It's always going to be under the influence of the owner a little bit.
Are you still chairman of Pro Privacy?
No, I exited that business in February this year.
Okay. But it's interesting that you founded a digital privacy protection company. And I just want to ask you one question about it. And it's not so much about the company per se as it is about online privacy. Because I think up till recently, if you had raised this concern with a lot of people, especially conservatives, actually, they would have thought to themselves, well, I'm not doing anything wrong, so I don't have anything to hide, which is, I think, the way they feel about the police in the US. Well, if you're not getting in trouble, you don't have anything to worry about. But there is good reason to be concerned about your online privacy, whether or not you're engaged in money laundering or whatever, even if you are just an ordinary person. So can you make the case for why people should care about that?
Well, I think it's exactly what you're seeing now is that the data that you're giving up, you're always giving it up without even realizing that you're giving it up, can potentially be used by any authority that later has access to it. And it seems that because we can see that the social networks have been working with the authorities, and we know from the Edward Snowden revelations as well that the NSA has all sorts of access to smartphones and electronic devices. You never know when that information is going to be used against you. And then now you have sort of Biden saying that anyone who's the Republican is potentially a terrorist or something. He said words similar to that. And that's probably going to be echoed in all the government organizations as well. And then you think, okay, well, here are all the social networks gathering all this data about us. Then we have the president saying that half the country is potentially a terrorist. That means half of the country can potentially have data used against them in certain ways. So it's a huge risk. And back when tech was sort of getting started, it didn't seem like a huge risk. And as you said, you know what? It doesn't really matter if anyone knows what websites I'm visiting because I'm doing nothing wrong. But then it turns out even your political views can potentially get you into trouble now. So you can see how that's turned on its head and it's become a huge risk.
Yeah. All right. Let's talk about Retalk, retalk.com. The big problem, of course, you have to overcome, you already know this, is the network effect. You need to get enough people there to get enough activity to make other people want to be there. But the thing is, how do you get that initial burst of energy? There are other people starting or have started social networks that are lighter on the content moderation, for example. So it seems like an enormous amount of work. How do you overcome these obstacles?
We've got sort of two selling points on Retalk. One of them is that we're trying to build good discussion that's not like other social networks, which are mostly built on sort of short form, hostile conversation. The format of Retalk is more about trying to go to longer form, better discussions. That's one thing. And then the other thing is that we don't have this woke censorship that many other platforms do have. And then I think the other big part is that I have a tech background and I've been a tech entrepreneur for almost 20 years. So on the tech side as well, I do know what I'm doing. So putting all those together, I think there's a good basis to building something good. And I've got a bit of capital built up from my previous ventures. So that's been a bit of a help in sort of getting things moving and on the marketing side of things. So we're sort of 2 years in, we've got about 250,000 people signed up, about 50,000 people engaged with Retalk in a month. So it's going quite well. And I definitely spent a lot less money than many of the other big budget new social networks like Getter and Truth Social and those. So we've been very, very effective, I think, with our knowledge and our capital. So I hope to carry that on and build something really good.
Well, of course, something like this is going to attract a lot of political discussion because that's precisely where, on other platforms, people are running into obstacles. But that's not exclusively what's talked about on Retalk because you highlight some of your active communities you have on there. So you've got antique and classic cars. You've got people talking about books and cooking and crafts and fishing and football and anything you can name. So it isn't just here's such and such perspective on politics.
Yeah, I'm trying to, as you said, the big attraction, I think, is politics. And a lot of the discussion is about politics. But I'd like to really build a grassroots community on Retalk and actually build lots and lots of grassroots communities because the way Retalk is structured, anyone can sort of create their own discussion board or group or whatever you want to call it. And, you know, if your hobby is antique cars, then you can start a community about that. And I think it's nice to talk about politics, but also people are very interested in discussing their hobbies and their interests. So we've been trying to build out these other communities around some other topics. But yeah, the biggest discussions are probably still the political ones.
Yeah, of course. I personally like the layout, the way it works, better than I like Twitter. I just find Twitter to be completely chaotic. And of course, you can have only 280 characters for what you're saying. And so that's obviously not really conducive to a healthy, long form discussion. It's more people making snide remarks at each other back and forth, with some exceptions, of course. Now, here's the thing, though. As we sort of hinted a minute ago, we have some alternative platforms. You named a couple of them. And then on a smaller scale, we have MeWe, we have Minds. Why would you not say, well, we already have people starting up alternative platforms. Why don't I see if there's some way I can add my talents to that? Why another one?
I think it's probably more of a personal entrepreneurial spirit thing. I thought I can probably do a better job. On the one hand, there's a lot of the sort of Twitter clones, Getter and Truth Social and those platforms. And I also really don't like the Twitter format. I think it's almost like cigarettes. It's like very, very addictive and you have to go on there. But then every time you go on there, you feel worse. So I wanted to create something different to that. And then also you have things like Minds, things like MeWe, but again, they're much more closed. And yeah, I thought something that doesn't exist really is the format that Retalk is. If you know about Reddit, it's quite similar to that format where you have sort of the subreddits, which are the communities, and then you have quite long form text-based discussion. And I didn't really see anything like that. And I thought this is definitely something that conservatives are probably looking for. And there's a lot of complaints about Reddit. It's probably one of the most woke social networks out there. So I saw an opportunity there to create an alternative to Reddit. And I think it's worked quite well. Our user base has managed to turn into sort of quite a good age 50 plus community, which is a complete contrast to Reddit, which is probably more like 18-year-olds. So I think the tech entrepreneur in me just saw the format and an opportunity that doesn't exist. So I tried to create that and it's worked quite well.
Hey folks, quick message from Woods here. You and I are different from the rest of society because we don't just do what everybody else does. We do not operate on autopilot. And that instinct saves us from a lot of bad decisions. And just mindlessly going along with the crazy and broken American healthcare and insurance system is one such decision. Well, Crowd Health has a better way to fund your healthcare costs. You can see any doctor you want, no deductibles, exclusions, or copays. You pay only the first $500 of any healthcare event. The Crowd Health community takes care of the rest. You pay one low monthly total to fund your account, and that monthly subscription helps fund healthcare costs of the entire Crowd Health community. So Crowd Health reverses the vicious incentives that got us into this mess in the first place. Unlike insurance companies, Crowd Health helps you find great care at a fair price, always pays doctors as quickly as possible, and actively negotiates to keep costs down for everyone. Take charge of your healthcare today with Crowd Health. Open enrollment is the only time you can hit eject on the broken system without penalty, so don't wait. And for a limited time, join for just $99 per month for your first 6 months when you use promo code WOODS at joincrowdhealth.com. That's joincrowdhealth.com, promo code WOODS. Crowd Health is not health insurance. It's a totally different way of paying for healthcare. Terms and conditions may apply. I've heard a lot of horror stories about people getting thrown out of Reddit groups, or that there'll be some interest that I have, and then I'll be told, oh, the Reddit group on that is terrible. It's full of crazy people or people who want to shut you up, and it's demoralizing. So that is interesting to hear from you. How would you describe your political outlook?
I lean sort of fairly libertarian, although as I get older, as is the case with quite a lot of people, I've maybe moved slightly less libertarian. But I think one of the best inventions of humanity is the sort of free market. And whenever there's problems, you should probably just rely on the free market. One of the discussions I've had many times with conservatives is about whether social media should be regulated. And I think it's much, much better to just leave it up to the free market, see what happens, let entrepreneurs create new products, let users go to those new products. It's much, much better than sort of coming in centrally and trying to control things. I mean, for the reasons we discussed, once you create those controls, you never know who the next person in power is going to be and how they're going to use that power. So that's the philosophy I follow on Retalk as well. I think it's much, much better that I get a chance as a small company to create a new social network. If I do a good job, then users will reward me. I'll build a business. And, if Zuckerberg and Twitter want to make lots and lots of mistakes, then let them make mistakes and they'll hopefully lose lots of users. So I'm a big, big believer in letting the free market solve issues.
Do you attribute this perspective of yours to your family background at all? Or where do you think these ideas came from in your life?
I think it's a mixture of growing up in the UK and coming from Hungary. You know, if you ask me who was sort of the top leader of the country ever, I'd probably say Margaret Thatcher. So that's probably from the UK side of things. But I mean, she has a lot of fans in Hungary, probably because of our communist background. So I think we're very, very wary of centralized control. We know that centralized control can cause massive problems. And it seems like every success story we've seen coming from sort of the Western world or the English speaking world has been from free markets. So, you know, it's not the easiest path to walk for many people, because when you're free, it comes with responsibility and you have to work hard. And for that reason, many people don't like it, and they like to rely on the government and they like to rely on someone helping them. But if you want to build a better world, then you have to give freedom to people and you have to give them that responsibility to create. So that's what I believe in very, very deeply.
I've always wondered, if you start a social network, I think I have a theory as to how you did it. But what do you do when 3 people show up and they see that there isn't really any content, and then they leave and they never come back? Do you do it where you get a bunch of people signed up and you say, we're going to email you when we're ready to open? And so then maybe you've got 1,000 people waiting, then you email them, and then you have the energy of 1,000 people.
Yeah, you've worked out the secret already. That's basically what I did. Yeah, about 2 months before launch, I started to advertise, to get together email addresses. And yeah, when we launched, I sort of emailed probably around 10,000 people, and not too many of them signed up, but at least we had that initial boost and we actually had some content on the site. And of course, I'll admit I did also post a lot of content myself as well, so it wouldn't be completely empty.
Sure.
Yeah.
So would I. Yeah, naturally, you want there to be something waiting for people. Yeah, absolutely. I've launched some things myself, but the idea of launching a social network just seems like it brings with it so many almost insurmountable obstacles that I have to admire you, that you poured in the energy, you have indeed built up a sustainable community, and now it's just a matter of getting the word out further.
Yeah, I think maybe as a very first venture, I wouldn't have done this, but because I've done many, many things over the last 20 years, and I thought, right now I want to build something that can potentially be massive. So it seemed like it had a small chance of succeeding, or it would be very, very hard, but it could become something really, really big. So that gave me the motivation. Yeah, I've had some successes, so I didn't want to just build another average size business. I wanted to build something big. And we're not quite there yet with Retalk, but I hope that we will become massive and it will become a very, very well-known brand.
It's very hard to change people's habits. That's the thing. And incidentally, even if they continue to use the old platforms, it's still hard to get them to change their habits in the sense of adding an additional one to their stable of platforms. So I would think that one way to proselytize about it is really to appeal to the current user base and say, you know how good this platform is, and if you want to see it become more vibrant and energetic, then you know the kind of people who need to be here. Send them the link. Help me out, help us all out, help yourself out, bring your friends.
Yeah, this is actually something I think we neglected a little bit, and we're going to launch a referral program quite soon. But the other thing is, something I'm quite glad about, is that the user base is an older audience, because I think, probably the older you are, the more set you are in your ways. And hopefully the people that I do have and who love Retalk are definitely going to stick around, probably more than an 18-year-old would. So I hope that the current user base is very strong and very sticky. And then hopefully from that, we can build out and they can all invite their friends. And as you said, build off of referrals and make it go viral.
How is the site funded?
All of it right now is from my previous ventures. So I
So you're offering it for free? Nobody pays anything?
You can support Retalk and then you get sort of not a verification like on Twitter, but just like a badge, and you can upload a profile picture. And we also offer a feature where you can automatically delete all of your posts after 30 days. So if you want to sort of protect your privacy, you can basically pay for that. So yeah, you can support Retalk if you want, but for everyone else, it's free. So anyone can use it for free.
Okay, interesting. So you would never think of using advertising, or would you?
No, we've got advertising on there. And I think it does help some, but it would be good to get rid of it at some point. Yeah. if I can afford to.
I mean, I personally have nothing against advertising at all, but I understand some people do. So, all right, well, look, retalk.com is the website, and it looks like it's a simple enough process to go there and get going. Now, my demographic on this show, the largest age group that listens is between 35 and 44. But I assure you, this is an unusually mature 35 to 44. You know, they're just like 50 plus in their hearts and minds and souls. So they may indeed be cut out for Retalk. So retalk.com, retalk.com. Give it a shot. I mean, here's somebody who said there are big problems and I am going to see if I can solve them. So we should support somebody like you, is my opinion. So first of all, thank you for the effort you put into this. I just can't imagine just thinking through all the challenges I'd have to face. There are some people like me who would just find it exhausting and not even try. And then there are people like you who, being visionaries, you can't help yourself. You have to try. The harder it is, the more you want to try it. So good for you. And I hope it continues to have success and keep on growing.
Yeah, thank you very much. And thanks for having me on the show. And it's a lot of fun for me. I mean, it's not a massive burden. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't be doing it. Quite a big fan of Jordan Peterson. And I think for me, like, Retalk is definitely a mission and it's a meaningful goal. And when you find one of those, I think it's quite easy to work on it. So, so I'm quite happy to do it. And I hope it's going to be massive. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, thanks again.
Thank you.
All right, folks, before we wrap up for today, let me introduce you to naptownthink.com, a Tom Woods listener blog. I dare say you have never visited a blog quite like naptownthink.com. It's a libertarian blog, so it's got plenty of philosophy. It's got great material on Jared Casey's fantastic book, Libertarian Anarchy. Lots of commentary on world events. You'll find plenty of humor, poetry, deep thoughts, and may I say, a bit of oddballery. Check it out at naptownthink.com. I'll link to it at tomwoods.com/2240. And remember, I'll promote your blog, but you got to get your hosting through my link. And once you do that, I'll promote it for you, and I'll do a whole bunch of other things that'll give you a nice advantage out of the gate if you want that blog or website to get some eyeballs on it. So get the details on how I can help you by going to tomwoods.com/publicity before you start that site. I'll see you tomorrow.
Become a smarter libertarian in just 30 minutes a day. Visit tomwoods.com to subscribe to the show for free, and we'll see you next time.
Like the sound of The Tom Woods Show? My audio production is provided by Podsworth Media. Check them out at podsworth.com.